Hello everyone, this is Jason from Primetime Aquatics, and in this video I wanted to talk about something that's super important, and that is how do we buy and pick out fish from our pet store. It's one of the most exciting things that you can do, especially when you're new to fish keeping, is you go to the store and there's all these different options. You want to pick out all these cool fish and bring them home and see how they do in your aquarium. And while that is super fun, one of the most stressful things that can happen in fish keeping is when you bring those fish home and they're sick, and they get, not only are they sick, but they get all your other fish sick, and that can be really, really stressful and very discouraging. So in this video, what we're going to do is talk about how to avoid that to the best of our abilities. Hope you enjoy it. All right, so you're at the pet store. What do I recommend? Thing number one, if people are asking you if they can help you, I would just first tell them, hey, for right now, we're just looking. And that's super important, because when you're walking around a pet store, especially one that you haven't been to before, you want to observe the tanks. Look around at the tanks, see if there are any diseased fish in the tanks. Are there any sick fish in the tanks? What does the water quality look like? Now, what are we looking for in terms of disease? So here are the things. Let's say that you've got some fish that you really are interested in. What I will do, if I go to a pet store and I find some fish that I might like, I will sit in front of that tank for 5 or 10 minutes, and I will watch not only the fish that I want, I will watch the other fish in that tank as well. I will look at the fish around that tank and other tanks. I'll watch what the people in the fish store are doing. So for instance, what I want to know when I'm looking in the tank, are there any signs of disease? Here's what I would be looking for. Any white spots. One of the most common diseases that you're going to run across when you go to a pet store is ick. Even if the store usually has really good quality fish, if they are not quarantining those fish when they bring them in before they put them out on the floor, there's always a risk that what they've brought in could potentially have ick. So I'm looking for those little white spots, not just in the tank that I'm interested in, but in other tanks as well. And then what I want to know is, what are the fish store employees doing? Are they using the same nets over and over again, going into the different tanks with the same net? Because guess what? Even if the fish that you want is in a tank that looks like it's in good shape, if they just took fish out of a diseased tank and now they're using that same net to catch your fish, you run the risk of transferring disease from the sick tank to your fish, and then you're bringing that home. So I'm watching what the employees are doing. I'm looking for sick fish. The other thing I'm looking for in that tank, are there any dead fish? I generally stay away from buying fish in a tank where there are dead fish that have not been removed. It's just a bad sign. Next thing I'm looking for, are there any fish that look really skinny? Are there any fish in the tank that are having a hard time swimming? Because that can indicate disease. And so the fish that I'm looking at, they may be great. And maybe you're looking at tetras and there's 24 tetras in that tank, but 3 or 4 of them are struggling. You're like, oh, I just don't want those 3 or 4 that are struggling. Do you know why they're struggling? Do they have an internal parasite? Are they just getting the signs of ick, but you haven't seen the white spots yet? Do they have some kind of a fungal infection, bacterial infection? We don't know why. What we do know is, if we look at a tank and we've got some fish in that tank that are struggling, or they're sick, they're really skinny, this is probably not a good idea to pull fish out of that tank and bring them home. You could potentially introduce disease into your tank. By the way, we have done videos on how to quarantine fish. I'll put that in the upper right hand corner, as well as in the description below. It's one of the most important videos I think I've ever done. Highly recommend. If you don't have a really strong game plan for quarantining fish, or you haven't been doing it, watch that video. You really should be, to avoid a lot of potential issues. The other thing I'm looking for in these tanks, are there a lot of fish hiding? Are there a lot of fish that are fin nipped? That can all mean that the fish in that tank are stressed, and stressed fish have a habit of getting sick, and so it's just all clues to the puzzle. Do we have any fish in the tank that are sinking to the bottom and they're not supposed to be, and they're just kind of laying there? Do we have fish that are gasping at the surface of the water for extra air? That usually means that there's something wrong internally, or they've got ick, again, not showing the spots, and something is cutting off their oxygen supply. So we're looking for those clues as well. Another interesting thing that you could be looking for is, what does the filtration system look like at this pet store? Some pet stores have a central filtration system where the water is being recirculated out of all the tanks into a central filter, and then it's being returned back to those tanks. Again, what that means for us is, we're not just concerned about that one tank in terms of whether or not fish are showing signs of disease. Now we have to look at all the fish tanks that are on that same system. And so If you've got a fish store that's maybe using sponge filters and just a central air system, that's fine because water is not being exchanged. But if you have a sump system or a big central filtration system, that can be something where you might be a little concerned. You know, as an interesting side note, we do a lot of fish store tours. I'll put those in the upper right-hand corner as well as in the description below. If you want to see some stores that I think do a good job of making sure that they generally sell healthy fish, I'm looking for all of these things. I'm looking at what their employees do. I'm looking at how they maintain their tanks. I'm looking at the quality of their fish because it's so important. In fact, we did a video a while back whether or not a local fish store can even survive. And it was an interesting discussion because some of these stores that quite frankly are doing it wrong are just leading customers into bad situations. So if they're sharing equipment in between tanks, if they have these large central systems and they're not properly quarantining the fish before they bring them into the actual tanks for sale, that can be a big problem. That is one of the coolest things. If you walk into a local fish store and they are quarantining their fish for 4 weeks, right? Not a day, not 2 days. If they can quarantine those fish for 4 weeks and then bring them out and sell those fish, you drastically reduce the likelihood that you're going to be getting sick fish from that store. All right, everyone, I hope you found this video useful. If you did, share, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.